Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Reality Check Podcast. I'm Carlos, and I'm joined clockwise by I am still federally unemployed Marcus, and below there on the bottom of the screen, Raul Mas. And before anything, we get into our topic, please remember if you like what you're seeing, like and subscribe. So today's topic is the Schumer shutdown, and we'll get into why it's being called that. I can certainly explain why I'm calling that. And what are the ramifications? It's a month now. It's a month, and what's going to happen? Are they interested? Are they weighing the odds? Are they looking at today? I heard that excuse me, I heard that the GOP supposedly has about a 5% lead in the polls about that. People have got to be very, very pissed at this thing in general. And it's once again why Congress has, regardless of party, has in the tank approval ratings. Whenever Congress tries to criticize the president, I can't think of a president in recent history that couldn't say, "Really, you guys are criticizing my approval? Look in the mirror." But I'm going to go ahead and in clockwise manner. Let's first hear from Marcus. What is your take on what's going on with this thing and where it may go?
Well, let's just give some context. Right now, we're 37 trillion in the hole. When we're dealing with shutdowns, it's we're only dealing with discretionary spending, not mandatory spending. So discretionary accounts for like 26% of the budget. Uh, Mandatory spending covers 60%, and the debt covers 13%. And going from last week's or last episode's podcast, the hill that the Democrats want to die on is subsidizing the unaffordable Care Act. You have, in order to be a good Democrat, you have to support Obamacare. If you don't, then you're being an apostate. So that's the hill they want to die on. The Republicans, they um, they took control by being the first to do messaging. Like, this is not really about that. It's about funding illegal aliens on healthcare, and, and they do have a point. But then it becomes like when you peel the onion, it's like how much of a mess appropriations is. There's 12 appropriation bills, and in the 40 years of Congress, or the past 40 years, Congress has only approved only four times, and it's in that period where they approved all 12 appropriation bills. The rest of the time, it's passing CRs, continuing resolutions.
Kicking the
Right.
can.
Well, kicking the can. So my take is there has to be reform on how they appropriate, and has been discussions on streamlining the committee process because it's convoluted, it's complex. There's no oversight, or it lacks the teeth to do anything. Uh, and and uh, and then there's incentivizing for them to get the job done, because a lot of times when they do these shutdowns, or where it comes down to voting, they're right in the cusp of having a recess, and they take the recess. So that's the rub. The
They
rub.
run out the clock. Basically, they run out the clock. Raul, what say you on this?
No, listen, I think the Democrats are they're in a hole. They're getting into a deeper hole, and they don't realize that you got to stop digging, right? I think they're getting themselves into a situation, um, that they're going to end up with a lot of egg on their face. They're going to end up alienating a lot of their base. Um, I think it was earlier today, or maybe it was yesterday, I guess, that the American Federation of Government Employees, which is like the largest union representing federal workers, the American Federation of Government Employees, basically came out and said, you know what, enough is enough. We should pass a clean continuing resolution, kick the can down the road, and then continue the debates, once that is passed. So, there's about 1.4 million federal employees that are going to be missing their first full paychecks. And so it's really beginning to hit home. You're also facing a situation where later on this month, the recipients of subsidized food, the SNAP recipients,
No,
nutrition programs, what used to be called food stamps, that money is beginning to run out. And by the way, I am shocked. Okay. I mean, I had heard the figure, but I found it hard to comprehend that we have approximately 42 million people in America that are receiving subsidized food. And a lot of them have been receiving it for a long period of time. I have a problem with that because a safety net is supposed to be a safety net to capture you and, take care of you until you can get back on your feet. But this has now turned into a sort of permanent handout for a lot of people in America, and it's
it's not a
counterproductive.
safety net, it's a buffet.
Don't want to go back to work because they're getting their food paid for. The government sends them a card to put food on the table. So I think the longer this drags out, the worse it becomes. Not so much for Republicans, because the Republicans are saying, listen, we're willing to give you that continuing resolution, and we can figure this stuff out later on, but let's get the government open again. And they I think Schumer is in fact driving this. He has to appear to be a tough guy, because he's facing the possibility of AOC primary, trying to take over his job. And so he has to basically lean in, appear to be tough, appear to be standing up for and on behalf of the extreme left of his party. But I think the longer he holds out, and if he at the end of the day he has to cave without getting any concessions from the president, simply because he's getting pressure from folks like the American Federation of Government Employees, he's going to look like a fool. I mean, he is really putting himself in a very precarious situation. So I don't think this will last much longer, especially not with the prospect of literally 40 million people suddenly not being able to eat. Okay, that's a real problem, right? And Trump is just saying, listen, all you got to do is just go along with us. Let's have a continuing resolution, which is exactly what Schumer had argued for last spring. Okay, but now he doesn't want to do it because now he needs to stand up to Trump for his own petty political reasons, and it's not going to end well for him. It's not going to end well for the Democrats. I don't see. I mean, when you guys got like Fetterman. Remember Fetterman? Lurch. I'm actually starting to like that guy now. He's actually starting to be two reasonable Democrats out there saying this is friggin' ridiculous. I mean, I'm not going to go along with this stuff about shutting down the government. That's insane. Okay, so here you've got a guy like Fetterman, right? I mean, obviously he comes from Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's very much of a purple state, back in play again, and he's got to be careful because he's got a lot of conservative voters in his state, people that voted for him. But I think these guys are they're in a deep hole and they keep digging. They're not learning their lesson. Okay, so that's a problem. It's a real problem.
Marcus, you were wanting to chime in. Please do.
Yeah, just kind of alluded about SNAP. Um, there is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse there. And then, I'm a fiscal hawk, a fiscal conservative. So I kind of understand where Senator Rand Paul and Representative Thomas Massey are like the deciding no votes on continuing resolution, because it's like keep spending as it is without any changes, like keep paying for some of the waste, fraud, and abuse. and I could understand that. There should be cuts to this, not at the current spending level, a little deeper. Like I believe in like sequestration.
Sequestration.
Yeah, but
Yes, sequestration.
but yeah, going with like these a lot of these people when you look at YouTube videos or Twitter, they're well fed. I would say slightly morbidly obese, and they're complaining about not getting their SNAP, and they look able-bodied. That's my take, and my take on things that there has to be a segue, a transition to get some of these people out of the dependency on SNAP. Look at under Margaret Thatcher, it was pretty much a big welfare state, and under Thatcher's regime, she pretty much cut welfare funding, where it compelled people to work. So one way we should look into that is for the government is look at what critical skills, what critical uh, employment that's needed, and offer a training pipeline or regiment to get them off of SNAP and to be employable to these critical skill sets.
Well, yeah, those are excellent points. Lazy people don't want to effing work. That's why they're not effing working. And Rand Paul is correct. I agree with Rand Paul. What I don't agree with is let's open the government, vote to open the government, and then have that debate. Because if you double down on not opening it, that's even in the end, I think it's going to hurt the Dems more. Uh, and by the way, it is not just the SNAP abuse, which is horrible. Able-bodied people, lazy people that don't want to work. It's also the Obamacare subsidies. There were people making $600,000 a year. Okay, that's more than I made as a practicing dentist. Full disclosure. That's why I don't have a house in Cocoa Plum, right? That's why I live in Vero Beach, even though I love it here. But anyway, if you're making that kind of jack, you do not have right to be subsidized by the taxpayers for healthcare. You can afford a policy, and that's again another thing that they're talking about. And yes, they're going to kick a lot of people off of the handouts, the gravy train. But when you try to do that, it's going to be holy shit hit the fan. There's going to be shrieking. The only thing I'm looking at also, definitely Schumer is scared of a challenge. Now, of course, they'll deny it, but you can just tell their reaction whenever they ask AOC, who will never go on anything but an uber liberal network. When they ask them anything about that, they blow up. Same thing with Sanders. They blow up. And that to me is an indicator. Oh, I touched the nerve, which I touched many nerves for many years, but they were numb. That's the difference.
Uh,
Yes.
Carlos, you mentioned about Obamacare fraud, where I'm assuming it's physicians pocketing like at least 500,000 or more. Can you explain how they would defraud Obamacare?
Well, by first of all, by having people on it that shouldn't be on it. If you have patients, and that part you can't blame the physician, but if you're overbilling, and if the system is not going to be very eager to catch you, we had a colleague in Miami whose name will go unmentioned, and she got a 5 year, and she tried to appeal it, and they said no way, 5 year suspension for Medicaid fraud. So when they want to catch you, they will. But if it's a wink and a nod and we don't want to look, that's one way. And if you're a physician that you're saying, hey, what the hell? What do I care? I'm not paying for it. I'm overregulated. I have too much overhead. Let's face it, the medical profession in the United States is not what it was in the time of Marcus Welby, MD. You know, it's a lot of physicians are basically employees. Sadly, they're employees and they will always be. They're not going to have their own practice. And I understand that the practice model, it's done it in dentistry too. The practice model has changed, has morphed, but and not always for the best. Same thing with the drugstores. The mom and pop drugstore doesn't exist now. It's Walgreens, it's CVS. But anyway, if that person feels that way and they've got a bunch of patients where they're getting capitation money or just regular private insurance claims, going to rock that boat. They're not going to go to Tallahassee and say, hey, legislators, there's too many people that shouldn't have insurance and they're paying me all kinds of monthly income. You need to put a stop to that. That is just not going to happen.
Look, it's just remarkable, and I just to me that idea that I mean, think about this, right? We have a population of, I forget what the latest population number is of the United States, but let's say it's 340 million, roughly. Um, and you're talking 42 million receiving SNAP benefits. That's
12%.
yeah, it's 12%. Exactly. That's a big number, right? I mean, that's a huge, uh, in my mind, a pretty large part of the population. And I have to believe that part of the problem here is that people are just lying on the applications, right? They're making stuff up. They're finding workarounds, um, to continue to collect benefits, time and time and time again, indefinitely. Um, and the benefits are per person, right? So the more children you have, the more money you get for food. I think the average is about $187 per person, right? So obviously, $187 for one person for a month, not a whole lot of money, okay? But if you've got three kids and they're not big eaters because they're small, you're talking now about six, seven, $800 a month, towards food, and you can feed small family, with that kind of money.
Minus the father.
Mhm.
Minus the father.
Yeah,
It's they're paying them to uh, disassociate the family unit.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're off from Maine.
Again, it gets back to the whole concept. Look, I think every American is in favor of, most people are in favor of, having a safety net, right? I mean, people have problems. You have, for example, we have unemployment compensation. You pay into out of your salary. You pay for that unemployment compensation in case you ever need to access it. So in essence, you're getting money that you paid into the system when you're out of work. But that's limited typically to, I think 6 months, 26 weeks or something. You have to regularly report that you're out there looking for a job, and that you're actively searching for work and stuff. Um, and But nobody. I don't know how many people. When you fill out those reports or when you fill out these applications for SNAP benefits, it's not like these things are being audited, like they're being very rigidly enforced. No, you sort of like take people's word for it, and I think that's part of the problem, right? There are I don't think there's a great deal of oversight that comes with these programs, and people get on them, and it's easier to keep them on the programs than to confront people and get them back to work and into the workforce. And they have just grown over time. I mean, you see the graphs of the growth of all these programs, and it's just a straight line up, right? And you also see that straight line up, talking about your profession, Carlos, with medical and dental costs, right? I mean, they just keep going up and up and up and up. And I had a fellow I was talking to today who follows a lot of different economic graphs, and one of the things that he was showing me was the steep increase in people that are falling behind in their car payments.
Yeah.
And he's saying, look, this is one of the best indicators that the economy is really not in great shape, because when you see people that are sort of working class folks that depend on their cars to get to and from work, right? I mean, after your house, having a roof over your head, whether you're renting or own a house or whatever. But after that, for most folks, they need a car to get around, right? And so when people start falling behind on their car payments, it's an indication that the economy really isn't, where it should be. So, he was telling me, he says, look, this is just, one, and there's other, graphs that you can pull up and stuff that actually show that, a lot of American consumers are in fact, hurting. I mean, the inflation has not gone away. We haven't turned, the clock back on inflation. A lot of that came in, as during the Biden administration. The prices shot up dramatically. Okay, and they haven't come down, to where they were before for a lot of, especially for stuff like beef. Right? You hear the president now talking about, perhaps importing Argentine beef, right? I mean, I don't think it's something he wants to do, okay? But beef prices are like crazy, man. They're through the roof, right? I mean, I've stopped eating a lot of beef. I mean,
Better for you anyway. Go to Maurice Steak if you want to see where beef prices are. Marcus, go ahead, please.
uh,
Well, just to coincide why Trump is supporting Argentine beef, he pledged 40 billion in investments and tax relief for tariff support with Argentina because of President Javier Milei.
right.
He was going
Who
through
won, by the way? He won.
he was going through an election, and he pretty much Trump warned the Argentine people, if you elect a lefty, taxes and tariffs are going to go through the roof.
Yeah.
And his party won. But the thing about Millet, he was elected to promote radical free market reforms, which, when you define it, is austerity measures.
Yeah.
Because their currency was crap, their insurance was through the roof. So he cut red tape, he slashed public payroll, and he deregulated the economy. And that is not a simple fix, and it's not
Oh,
something you notice right away. I mean, it's like a slow moving ship. You're going to notice it
yeah.
like in about 18
But,
months, 2 years.
but Marcus, it was absolutely essential because I know that before Milei, I think over 50% of the workforce in Argentina was working for the government, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of those were just made up jobs. People didn't even show up for work. They were just, on somebody's payroll, on some government payroll. You can't run a country where 50% of the people are working for the government. It just doesn't work that way. I mean, I hate to say it, but I mean, the wealth is created in the private sector. That's where you get, these dramatic increases in productivity and huge pools of wealth and, money and new products and all sorts of innovation and stuff. And so that's what happened to Argentina. And they, it's been bitter medicine. And it's ironic because, right before this election, a lot of the major newspapers were saying, oh, Milei's, probably going to get hammered. That's why Trump is having to bail him out because, people aren't going to vote for his party. And he did remarkably well, right? I mean, I think people understood that, yes, it's bitter medicine, but we're not going back to the old, Peronista party that destroyed this country in the first place. So,
No, but the thing about, I know we're dealing with. I understand we're dealing about the government shutdown, but just to kind of finish off this topic, uh, uh, food prices have gone up at least 100%, and I can measure it by just going like McDonald's or Burger King. A $5 meal is like a $10 meal.
yeah,
I go with my girlfriend. Instead of $10, it's like $24.
yeah.
So that's why Trump did this with Argentina to get cheaper beef, but at the cost of small to mid-size cattle farmers in the U.S.
Yeah. Well, listen, I have a different take on that, and I've heard this from a lot of ranchers. The issue really isn't, the ranchers themselves. The problem is that there's about, I think it's like 4 or 5 meat packers that dominate the global meat industry, right? One of them is actually a Brazilian firm, JBL. And you've got Smithfield, Hormel. These are enormous multinational companies, and they have like an oligopoly. And what does an oligopoly do? It basically controls market. It tells you this is what I'm going to pay you for your beef, whether you're in Argentina or the US or in Brazil, okay? And these guys have a lock. Like I said, JBL, I don't know if you have them out there in Alabama. What are these?
There's Koch Foods and JBL. They do with the poultry aspect of it, pork.
But they have these stores here now. Gosh, I forget the name of them. They have like a whole chain of them here where you can go and you buy like frozen meats and stuff. The whole supermarket is just like one big frozen meat and fish section. And it's a chain of stores that become pretty popular now. trying to remember the name of them, but that chain of stores is owned by JBL. It's a big Brazilian meat producer. So I think at the end of the day, the issue isn't the ranchers. Um, you know, they don't set the price for what their cattle get sold at. I mean, that's done by the packing. Those prices are set by humongous meat packers that have an oligopoly. I don't know how we got on this versus the government shutdown, but I think it's all related to it, right? Because these are all huge economic problems that we have in this country.
It's a food, and I wanted to say also with the issue of keeping yes, it's easier to keep them on those programs and remove them, but it's also, apart from they don't want the confrontation, it is a jobs program. The more people that are on the handout, on the dole, the more bureaucrats and people. It's Rush Limbaugh used to say that. He used to say, if they start to dismantle this or that, ladies and gentlemen, wait till you hear the shrieking and the whining and the cacophony if they try to do that. When Clinton was trying to do welfare reform, I wanted to see, getting back to Schumer. Uh, by the way, the cowboy philosopher Will Roger famously said it: "If you find yourself in a hole, stop digging." That was decades ago. But anyhow, as far as Schumer, yeah, I think he's petrified of getting a primary challenge. I don't think that AOC has really a serious chance to run for national office. I think she's radioactive. I think any Democrat, whoever winds up being the nominee, let's just say Shapiro, if he were to take that bubblehead as a running mate, imagine whoever. Let's say that JD Vance and Marco Rubio run. Can you imagine AOC debating Marco Rubio? I'd pay to see that. I'd get popcorn. I'd break out the six pack.
Yeah.
But that said, I think for her that may be a threat, but really the real leverage, her end game is to primary him for the Senate. Yeah, and as far as the
Yeah, it's ironic
messaging,
because if you think about it, Chuck Schumer is the one guy who has not endorsed Mondami. I mean, um,
those are
which
the Jewish.
I think he realizes that if he were to endorse Mondami, how Trump has been making fun of him, saying that he's the senior citizen the senior senator from Palestine, right?
Right.
And he's on very wobbly ground with his Jewish benefactors and supporters and stuff because
He's trust
um,
stuff. Well,
yeah, and so I think he's like the one guy who, I mean, because Bernie Sanders and AOC have thrown in their support for Mondami, but Schumer hasn't. To his credit, I mean, you gotta give credit where credit is due. I mean, the guy's a complete and total disaster, but at least he hasn't cast his lot with Mondami. Um, but it's this is just an insane world that's that we're dealing with, man, and so many different issues that um, the whole shutdown, the this incredible debt, this wars going on in Europe, war in the Middle East. I mean, it's a mess, man. And I take my hat off to Donald Trump, man, because the guy is, I don't know where he finds the energy, to basically, and I don't, even if you're on Air Force One, man, that flight from the United States to Malaysia is a very, very long flight. Okay. And then Malaysia to Japan is another humongous distance.
yes.
Japan to South Korea, not that far, but I mean, the distances of traveling in the Asia Pacific region are vast, man. And yes, I understand you've got Air Force One, you're being weighted on hand and foot, you've got a nice, comfortable bed, but the time change, all that stuff, a guy who's in his 70s to be doing that with such
Almost 80.
and getting to Malaysia, dancing with all the people there and stuff. It's like, I don't know where this guy finds the energy for it.
Well,
And I think he's lucky that he's got Scott Bessent with him. He's got Marco Rubio. He's got a hell of a team behind him that's really, negotiating these deals and are probably working as hard, if not harder, than he is. And I think we're making enormous progress. I think we're getting back on track. You're seeing it reflected in the financial markets. We've hit highs. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, S&P 500, the Nasdaq are through the roof. And believe it or not, the oil prices that had gone up last week because of the fear of the Russian sanctions, those have stabilized again. Oil started to come back down again. Oil, had shot up over $4,000 an ounce, has kind of backed off a little bit now. The Fed tomorrow will find out whether they've cut interest rates or not. I think they're going to cut it 0.25% because they realize that the consumers taking it on the chin. We need some more support and lighten the load for them because of what you just said, Marcus. Right? I mean, I've seen it too. You know, a Happy Meal used to be a few bucks. Now a Happy Meal is $6, $7, $8. Right? It's like, what the hell happened here, man? I mean,
anymore. And by
yeah.
the way,
I
if
mean, we, when we get tired, we don't want to cook or something. My wife will say, "Oh, go to Wendy's and pick something up for us." Hell, man, you can't go. You can't eat. Two people can't eat at Wendy's for less than 15, $20. If you're lucky, right? Assuming
And
you do.
and it's hard if you're on a fixed budget.
Yeah,
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 smaller portions. By the way, with
yeah.
regard to so again, the topic tonight, the title is "What's the end game?" What are they going to do if they're losing it in the polls? And by the way, yes, I'm thrilled that the Dow is up, 401ks are better, but the average Joe six pack, that ain't going to solve it for them. The guy that
It doesn't.
that
It doesn't.
can't
It
afford
doesn't.
the
That's
drive-through.
great. That's great for people that have a 401k plan or have stocks and
Yes.
bonds and all that stuff. But you got to keep in mind, 70-80% of America is paycheck to paycheck, right? And
Yeah.
those people are not benefiting from those incredible rises in the market. But I think the other big news that I saw today was the fact that UPS is sorry, Amazon is laying off 14,000 corporate employees. UPS is laying off 48,000 employees. Okay. And those are more people that are going to be out of a job, right? And they're doing it. Why are they doing it? Because artificial intelligence is changing the workforce as well. And these companies have to figure out a way to stay competitive in a very competitive world. So it's not a pretty picture, man. I mean, I think Trump is betting it all on the fact that with all this money pouring into the U.S., that will eventually, trickle down to, working class Americans, because all those data centers, all those power plants that he's talking about, rebuilding with, thank God, nuclear reactors, which I think is long overdue.
Yep.
Those are going to, you need people to work. We don't have robots that are going to be building nuclear power plants, at least not in the next decade. We don't have a robotic workforce yet. So, those jobs are going to be done by skilled, craftsmen and people, laying down, bricks and mortar type of stuff. But, hopefully, we'll see some changes, man. I think we're on the right track. I don't know what the Democrats' end game is, Marcus, to answer your question. I think, Carlos, you're absolutely right. They're in a hole. They're digging themselves deeper and deeper. And I think that they are increasingly talking. They're almost like in an echo chamber with the far left, who are all suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. But a lot of these Democrats that have kind of come to the realization that this is crazy are sneaking out the back door of that echo chamber and either becoming independents or shifting to the Republican Party. And I think it's I don't know if they're going to be a particularly relevant party in another year or two, at the rate they're going.
I would ask Marcus, what is we know what Trump's holding out for and counting on. What's Schumer counting on? And then go ahead and do your take.
My take is Schumer wants to kick the can down the road. He wants to get Obamacare, the subsidies funded for X amount of years, and I think I quoted as like $380 billion for Obamacare subsidies. And like I said, if it's not a workable system, you can't compete with the free market. Going back on the Amazon and UPS, Amazon is fighting dirty on delivering the packages. Okay, because I see more Amazon delivery systems than UPS when products get delivered. So
Yes.
they're kind of that's why you see UPS, firing like X amount of employees. But going back to about the shutdown, the overall theme, my first initial statement was that we're 37 trillion. That's a national security issue, whether it's the debasement of the currency and our debt. That undermines an empire. And I sent a video out to you guys before about the 7 stages of an empire, and I'm just gonna kind of go on it briefly. The first stage is military overextension. Second stage is currency debasement. Third stage is debt spiral. Fourth stage is loss of productive capacity. Fifth stage is social decay. Sixth stage is loss of reserve currency status, and seventh stage is collapse. So we're going towards the sixth stage, where like OPEC is using other currencies than the dollar to purchase oil. We're looking at BRICS establishing a currency system to challenge the dollar. So, like I understand where we talked about Argentina. He had to establish austerity measures, and I feel like we can't kick the can down any further, because I'm looking at within 10 years we're going to see something bad. And then I'm looking at what are possible solutions. One solution is, instead of doing discretionary budget every year, do it every 2 years, because one year to cover $5 trillion budget with so many different agencies, so many different appropriations, other funding mechanisms, taxing, grants, all this stuff, it gets confusing. It gets very complex. Even though there's 12 committees overseeing it, I think one year doesn't do enough time to uh, uh, get it done. And with 2 years, they get a bill get the bills approved, and then they have a year to see if it's working or not on the off year, and then they could kind of plan accordingly. So I see one way to deal with that. Another thing is, for a possible solution, is kind of realign the fiscal and budget committees, and to open up their availability to look at uh, non-disclosed budgets. If it's expired, it's like non-disclosed budgets. But the thing is, they don't, when they do budgets, they don't have a full picture. They call it like capital budgets. They don't have the distinction between long-term and short-term capital budgets. So a good example is like, you build a bridge. So you see the budget on making a bridge, but you don't see the budget on maintenance. So you have like two different costs, but they don't see the bigger picture when you're dealing with these committees.
Yeah, it's like the printer is 59.99. You don't see the cartridges. I wanted to touch on. I want to propose what I think is going on. This I didn't believe really that they were waiting for the No Kings to be over to then cave. I didn't think they were going to, and so far I've been right. I wish I'd been wrong, but they have not caved. I think they're waiting this Friday. This is it, Halloween. Then the next day is Day of the Dead. In this case, the dead are the people that are receiving the handouts, and the SNAP. When that goes, and again, I think it's a calculated, it's a game of chicken, and I think the Republicans are saying the people that are going to get hurt the most and are going to take out their fury on you, us, the politicians, are the people on your side, mostly Democrat voters, especially government employees getting canned, especially if they're permanent firings that cannot be undone. So that's I think Trump there has more leverage and more political capital than do the Dems. And then the other thing is, after that, one other question that I would pose to either one of you: what do you think is the I do agree that people are leaving quietly, as Raul said, sneaking out the back. How much pressure do you think Schumer is getting from people that are in purple states, or even states where they just happen to be a Republican? the Democrat, but like say maybe Georgia, which is Georgia's purple, but they're saying, hey, Chucky, get this shit done, okay? I'm getting killed. I'm getting people melting down my phone lines in my office. My constituents are furious.
Listen, he's got to be feeling it, Carlos. That American Federation of Government Employees. I mean, I forget how many members they have, but there's like tens of thousands of members, most of whom are heavily concentrated in the Northern Virginia area, right? And they're all basically saying, they basically told him enough is enough, man. I mean, we need a continuing resolution. Figure out, your deal with all these other issues, okay? But make sure we get paid, damn it, because they're going to start not getting paychecks in a very short period of time, right? Not to mention what we talked about for a while, the SNAP benefits and stuff. It's also running out of money. So I think when an organization like AFGE comes out and says enough is enough, we have to put politics aside and resolve these differences about healthcare later on. That is not what Schumer wants to hear, right? Because a large part of the reason why Virginia has gone from being red to being purple to now being blue is because there are so many federal workers living in those Northern Virginia suburbs that have overwhelmed the traditional, Republican voters from, Central and Southern Virginia type of stuff, right? So, his base, I think, is telling him, stop this, right? You can't continue this indefinitely, right? And meantime, Trump is barely even paying attention. Where is Trump right now? Trump is in friggin', South Korea. Okay, he's outside of the country, having a hell of a nice time, and everybody's nominating him for the Nobel Peace Prize. His ego is getting bigger and bigger, and he's enjoying himself, right? I mean, he's having a good time. He's not worried about the shutdown. I mean, yes, the reporters on the airplane asked him about that, but he's on his trip, outside, trying to make deals and trying to, reach an agreement with Xi Jinping, which is, incredibly important for us, right? The politicals, I think most Americans are fed up. They realize this is just, political football again, the blame game back and forth. And one thing I was going to tell you that really I thought was very eye-opening, Linda McMahon, who runs the Department of Education, right? Who is the one cabinet member who is likely to be out of a job really quickly. She basically came out and said, guys, it's October. All the kids are back to school. Okay. The Department of Education is shut down. Okay. But life goes on. And what does that tell you? What she said basically is the Department of Education is redundant. We don't need them. The kids are back in school. They're fine. They're going to get, they're going to learn. They're going to, whatever. Do we really need a Department of Education? I mean, this is the woman who runs the Department of Education saying, listen, just throw all my people out, put me out of a job. I mean, don't worry about the Department of Education because the kids are already back in school and nobody's worried about that stuff, right?
So I'm going to ask you guys a two-part question. One, will Trump follow through and lower the boom and just fire a whole shitload of people? Two, when will Schumer crack?
Say again, the first one.
Will Trump finally carry out a threat and lower the boom and fire a whole buttload of federal workers who are all Dem voters, by the way?
No, you know what? I don't think Trump wants to do that. I don't think Trump is looking to, I think you remember he had that big sort of fallout with Elon Musk and stuff, and I think he saw that this idea of like massive, firings of the federal government was starting to leave a bad taste in people's mouth. I think he tapped the brakes on that. I don't think he has I don't think that Trump is looking at massive job cuts as a way to solve America's economic problems. I think he realizes that there's an enormous government bureaucracy that needs to be thinned out. Okay. But I think, he I think he's also being playing smart politics. I think if he's got a lot of unemployed government workers, that's just going to or out of job government workers, that he fired. Those are people that are not going to vote for him, right? But what's happening here, ironically, is that these people are now not getting a paycheck, but it's not because of Trump. It's because the Democrats don't want to go along with a continuing resolution, which is exactly what this American Federation of Government Employees is saying. Hey, give us the CR, let's go with it and figure out the problems, the funding for Obamacare and all that stuff, figure it out, down the road. Kick that can down the road. Don't kick our paychecks down the road.
I don't think they're going to vote for him anyway. What about any prediction if you're there? When does Schumer crash?
Before Christmas.
Before Christmas, okay. And
I think it's in the next couple of weeks. I don't think we can get to Christmas.
well,
I think
It'll be before Christmas.
Yeah,
yeah,
it'll be in another 10 or 15 days. It's not going to be in December. I think it'll be, sooner rather than later. I think he's like I said, Trump is off, foreign country, and the Republicans don't seem to be in any hurry to, give him a check for $1.5 trillion or whatever it is that he's asking. It's not looking good for him. It's not looking good for him.
well, also when the SNAP quits snapping, and then SNAP benefits, I think that's going to be a major contributor because then they're really going to get people calling. And again, I do believe that the preponderance of that, the overwhelming majority of those folks are Democrat voters.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, well, you mentioned about I forget the first question, but how much of the workforce? I mean, potentially he could get rid of like 10 or 15% of the workforce, and we won't even feel it. And I'm sure before there was a government shutdown, he went to each department to develop a RIF list, reduction in force list, on the people who are deemed redundant or areas that are inefficient where they could just cut out. So, and that's my take. And when I say before Christmas, yeah, it could happen before, but my concern is they go through the same process on cramming down like an omnibus bill or CR, where they make it a 1,000 page spending bill, where you could hide the pork, and they submit it just before like a holiday, whether it's Christmas or New Year's or Thanksgiving, and then they're given like 36 hours to read it. Play those games. But if it's a clean CR, yeah, I mean, it could happen.
Yeah.
But I'm like Rand Paul and Thomas Mancy. It's still a lot of waste in a CR.
Yeah. Yeah. And let me remind our audience, and I know you two guys would remember this, but for our viewers, in 2013, and here we are in 2025. So it's the middle of the midterm, right? It's a year before midterms. 2013, there was a pretty sustained government shutdown. And people were saying, oh, God, the Republicans are going to get creamed. They're going to pay for it. They're going to really take it on the chin when the elections come next year. Okay, so 2014 comes around. We flipped Senate seats, 9 Senate seats, giving the GOP control of the Senate. So much for that. This conventional wisdom, the party in power always loses on a shutdown. I think the party that shuts it down loses. But
Yeah, and I think, Carlos, I think you're right. I think the polling that I've seen, okay, reflects that. There's this one fellow that's become pretty popular on CNN. He does a lot of analyze a lot of the polls, and it's kind of remarkable because he's usually delivering bad news to the Democrats, and for some reason they put him employed at CNN.
Something like that.
Yeah, I forget the guy's name, but he looks at the polls, and from what I've seen, not just from his reporting, but from others, the Democrats are not polling well here, right? I mean, there are President Trump's popularity remains pretty solid. Um, I think more people blame the Democrats than the Republicans for the shutdown. Um, but a lot of people aren't really paying that much attention to it, so it's not as big an issue as Schumer is counting on. Um, but the poll numbers are not telling us that. And look at what's happening in New Jersey. New Jersey is in play for the governorship, as is Virginia now, apparently, with Winsome Sears and the woman who's running against her. So you got if New Jersey were to flip and become Republican, who's that? I'm sorry.
Harry Enton, there's your guy.
Who?
The guy that reads the bad news for the Dems, Harry Enton.
Yeah, whatever, exactly. So, if New Jersey flips to Republican, and if Virginia stays with a Republican governor, that is pretty indicative that the midterm elections are not going to go well for the Democrats. And right now, the Democrats are having to pour millions of dollars into both of those states because they're not sure if they're going to win them. Those should have been layups for them, but it's not any longer. And I think that shows you this kind of structural weakness, if you will, in the Democratic Party, right? To where you see that what we saw it in the election. Trump basically ran the House with all the swing states. He basically ran off with every single swing state.
Ran the table.
And again with the governorships in New Jersey and Virginia that could in fact end up becoming red. Which Virginia is red right now, at least in the governor. But I think that doesn't bode well for Democrats in the midterms at all.
Well, as for Virginia, I do believe that in Jersey, I think Chiarelli's going to beat Mikey Sherrill. She's quite the weasel, and every day she puts her foot worse and worse in her mouth. She keeps digging. Now, Virginia, I'm worried because Winsome Earl Sears, I love her to pieces. Marine, tough lady. She's just not a very charismatic campaigner, and she's not a great debater. And unfortunately, it's Virginia. What we said earlier, Virginia is I'm gonna be blunt, infested with government employees.
Yeah.
Northern Virginia.
One thing that I just as a passing aside, man, I set a campaign contribution to Winsome Sears, okay, because
So did I.
all the reasons you mentioned. But man, you send money in to any political candidate now,
You're on a list.
the amount of friggin' text messages that I get. I mean, the most annoying, obnoxious, continuous text messages. It's like, I never again want to contribute to another Republican candidate if it's going to subject me to, weeks and months, and even, I still get emails from the Trump campaign. Oh, send us $5, send us $10, why haven't I heard from you, Raul? Like as if it was Donald Trump, like, texting me, like, this is Donald Trump, Raul. How come you keep ignoring my emails? Like, what the fuck is wrong with these people, man? I mean,
you should have two emails, one for spam.
Yeah, you should email that
you hit that little button on your cell phone, you swipe it off and say this is junk, and somehow they figure out a way to bypass you, right? I mean, it's like, no matter how many times you report it as this is junk, I don't want to get this anymore, whatever. Sure enough, the next morning you wake up and there's 5 or 6 emails from Winsome Sears begging for, come on, I'm here and I got to pull my TV ads if I don't get $5 from you. It's like, Jesus Christ, man. I mean, I wrote you a big check a couple months ago and now it's like the biggest mistake of my life, right? I mean, what are these people thinking? I don't know what these, I guess, they figure if you gave them money once, you're more likely to give them money twice. But I'm just kind of like, this is kind of crazy the way this whole thing has evolved, right? It's like, it's horrible. It's horrible.
Well, as I remember, historically, the GOP is good at funding like the big campaigns, but the down ballot, one of the things that I remember cost us a lot of down ballot races, even in 24. Trump did very well, but we didn't do nearly as well. Forget about that red wave of 22. That was a pipe dream. But it's the fact that we, as far as running quality candidates, uh, oh, by the way, funding, properly funding those candidates. I think, conversely, though, Mianis is going to beat that Jay, whatever his name is, Jay Jones. That guy is a disgrace. I mean, I think Mianis really KO'd him in their debate. And I think, but Spanberger makes me sick, just absolutely sickening. And especially to think that she can get away with it, that she can get away with it and be the governor of Virginia. But again, Virginia, is what it is.
And
I think maybe
Porter's not doing too hot in California against Hilton now in terms of polling now.
who against Hilton?
Katie Porter, the one who
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
who
yeah.
who just went Karen on any reporter.
All her workers, all her little staff, right? She's like,
Yeah,
She went Misery. Remember the Kathy Bates movie Misery? She reminds me of Misery. Yeah, yeah, that was right. Exactly. Minus the butcher knife. But yeah, I think I like Hilton is a sharp dude, and I tell you that debate. At some point, have they debated yet? I don't believe they have.
no.
Yeah, but that's not right away, is it? That election is in. I'm sorry to
I
confess I
think
haven't followed that one.
I think it's like next year.
It's next year. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
okay, but they will debate.
there's still a Democratic primary to go through.
Yeah, yeah, and we'll talk about that in a future date. I think we pretty much should start ending off here. So closing thoughts from my two colleagues. Marcus, take it away.
Yeah, just tying back about the government shutdown to last podcast that some of these discretionary funding should be reassessed towards self-funding mechanisms, like like the museums and national parks. They draw enough people where it could be self-funded for like food and water inspectors,
Yeah.
the chemical inspectors. The tax allocated could fund those inspectors. Another thing, air travel with TSA and the Ford the air controllers. There's enough tariffs, duties, taxes, and tariffs to help fund that portion. Another aspect is we have to embrace more of AI technology because when they say about the IRS is shut down and they can't process there's a backlog of like 50,000 applicants
mhm.
for business or for personal use.
Yeah.
And same thing with like the VA. With AI, they should kind of if it's a clean application, it'll go through. If there's flags to it, then it goes through like a person for a review process.
Yeah. Listen,
So
if UPS can get rid of 48,000 employees, okay, and probably replace most of those or replacing most of those with AI, I think the federal government can do the same thing, right? So
Yeah, well, that's
yeah.
why my delivery from yesterday is going to be Thursday. I might have a lot to do with it. All right, then. So thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. And remember, hit like and subscribe if you like what you heard. And that's going to pretty much do it. We bid you good night.